if there's one constant in this universe, it's that if you make a new Star Trek game, I'm going to buy it. So that's what I did. Star Trek Resurgence, released this week at a relatively reasonable price of around 30 quid. Automatic discount if you buy it on Epic, taking it down a few quid because that's the only way people will buy from Epic, I guess. And it's a narrative adventure game from a relatively new studio, Dramatic Labs, populated by a good amount of ex-Telltale Games staff. So I was hoping for a cracking story and some great choice-driven gameplay. Is that what I got? Let's take a look.
Welcome to the edge of the galaxy, Commander Rydek.
And by the way, all footage you can see here is from the first hour or so of the game, and the review itself will be as spoiler-free as I can manage. We have uploaded a full start-to-finish gameplay video for this. If you want to take a look for yourself, it's like a really, really, really long Star Trek episode. So let me address the changeling in the transport here first. Graphics. This is not a good-looking game. She's not a looker. She fell down the ugly tree, hit most of the branches on the way down. In this scene here from the opening of the game, you would be forgiven for thinking this was a late-gen PlayStation 2 game. Textures are quite low detail, character models often look pretty silly, ranging from wooden to overly elastic, like this little eyebrow raise here.
So, I know about your talk with Miranda.
You do?
She sent me a Priority 1 dispatch right after your conversation.
And some characters look like this.
Somebody once told me.
And that same character model is used in the same room 3 times, I think, here, all with just different colour skin. So from a presentation perspective, it's not great. It's sometimes not even good. However, keeping in mind its lower price, more of a AA game price than a AAA game price, I can look past it. My expectations were already lowered knowing that the quality is not meant to be reflective of a AAA game. However, there are some moments where it does look pretty good, mostly in more of the alien areas, and some of the main characters show moments of great facial detail, even though the mouth movements do seem a touch unnatural at times. Moving on to performance, I played this on PC with a RTX 4060 mobile, i9-13900H, and 32GB of RAM, and performance was, alright, I guess. I didn't really notice any major issues with the frame rate or frame pacing. The problems I think with this are more in-game engine stuff and things they've overlooked while actually making and testing the game. Here, for example, I spoke to an NPC and my character's run animation completely bugged out.
I dropped a non-ferrous connector between the coils. Gonna have to remove a few of them to find it, and then...
Ooh, then another hour of recalibrating. Ouch. I'll leave you to it.
When I started the game, I was using keyboard and mouse, and despite me starting from the menu with that control scheme, the very first QuickTime event that popped up gave me a controller prompt, which I then fumbled the left mouse button for, and it turns out that was the right thing to do. Future prompts then appeared as mouse and keyboard, but then if I ever loaded the game back up after closing it down to Windows, it always thought I was on controller at the point of loading up. A disappointing oversight that should have been picked up in testing really easily. I also encountered a few bugs that required me to restart the whole chapter, such as ending a conversation and having no options to select the item I was supposed to be interacting with. I also encountered at one point a tutorial message giving me the file name of the asset it was referring to instead of the name of the in-game object. Just an example of a serious lack of polish. Lastly, on performance, the PC version has no performance options. The resolution would actually only go full screen at a max of 1080p for me for some reason. There was no option for 1440p, which my monitor would have displayed. There was also no option to turn off the excessive motion blur. Audio-wise, the game has a great score, typical Trek style affair. Voiceovers are well delivered with a good mixture of different types of voices. However, there were occasional hiccups where it sounded like the audio was playing twice on certain lines. This happened 3 or 4 times throughout my playthrough, so a drop in the ocean to the amount of total dialogue available.
Commander Westbrook, right? Chief Science Officer.
You remembered my name and my rank. Impressive.
With that out the way though, let's talk about the story. I love the old Telltale games. Walking Dead Season 1 was probably my favourite, and the ending made me cry. Thick, masculine tears, of course. So I wanted a good story, and yes, it definitely delivered on that, which mercifully for a narrative adventure game is the point. You play as two characters, one who is the first officer of the Centaur-class USS Resolute, and a petty officer from the lower decks in the Engineering Corps. The game switches between them at different story beats and sees you embark after a lengthy stay in space dock, walking the hull of the ship itself, a very cool scene by the way, onto a mission to escort a diplomat, who I will not spoil here, to a warring system to mediate peace. Needless to say, the story does of course go beyond that, but this isn't a spoiler-filled review, so I'm not going to go much further. Overall, it delivers a reasonably exciting story, interesting aliens, diplomacy, some action sequences, and delivers some pretty cool in-universe cameos to boot. And after a pretty slow start, the story ramps up and hits some pretty big highs, including a particularly great space battle that really did feel like I was in command of a starship.
Locked on and ready to fire. Fire!
It's pretty typical Telltale style choice-driven gameplay. Most of the game is dialogue and narrative choices, and there's a long-lasting effect to certain choices that you do make. However, I found that I didn't really connect with too many of the characters, not in the same ways that I have with characters in similar games, such as Kenny in The Walking Dead. But don't get me wrong, most of them are likeable and do seem to have a good amount of personality. It does mix things up with the gameplay, especially with action sequences. There's quite a number of phaser battles, and while they're a little reductive in terms of depth, they were fun and broke it up nicely. You don't need to have too much Star Trek knowledge to have a good time here, but it certainly would be beneficial. Honestly, I think if you're not a Trekkie, you're not going to enjoy some of the sections that require plenty of object scanning and lengthy interactions with the in-game computers. Excitement from that will, I think, be more in a fan's territory. You could still enjoy it without much knowledge, but your mileage will much improve if you have a love for the series as a whole already. If I had to find a fault here, I would say that the game is a bit overly reliant on quick time events. I know it's that kind of game, but there's a lot more here than I would have expected. Every hand movement opening a panel has its own QTE, and honestly I think sections such as charting the course of a shuttlecraft would have been more enjoyable just as cutscenes instead of making me jankily move it myself. It felt like a bit much, but that is stretching. Some people love this stuff.
All set. Let's run the diagnostic.
Further to this though, and thank goodness, this game is pretty cheap in comparison to other titles, as it lacks a serious amount of polish on both a technical level and presentational level. Myriad bugs and hiccups that I can forgive at the price, but still were kind of aggravating. So, is it worth your time? If you're a Trekkie, I'd say definitely. However, don't expect to be seeing many in-universe references or Easter eggs. I searched and there wasn't really all that much in the way of that. It's not a love letter to other Trek. It's just a Trek story, and a pretty damn good one at that. If you're not a Trekkie, maybe. If you love this type of game, then yeah, sure. It's a narrative adventure, and it's a good example of one. If, however, you don't really like Telltale-style games, and you don't like Star Trek, then no, it's probably not for you. In spite of its technical shortcomings, which could, I guess, be patched out, it's still a great time, and the lower than AAA price more than makes up for them in the grand scheme of things. As I said before, we have a full gameplay video of this out on the channel. It'll be on the end screen if you fancy a 9-hour or so Trek episode. It's right there, no commentary. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe and check out our other videos. There's plenty of Trek in there as well. And that's all from me. Until the next one, take care and good night.
Engage.